The Light That Still Shines, a story of Mahamevnawa Monastery and the legacy of true Dhamma. There are moments in time when the world grows quiet, when even the winds seem to pause in reverence. August 14, 1999, was one of those moments. It didn't begin with trumpets. There were no banners in the sky or parades on the streets. Instead, it began with something far more powerful, a thought born of compassion. A thought planted by the ripening of countless lifetimes of merit. A thought that would, in time, set thousands of hearts ablaze with the quiet fire of truth. And from that one thought, Mahamevnawa Monastery was born. Let me take you back, not just to a place, but to a state of the world. The late 20th century in Sri Lanka land, once known for its deep roots in the Theravada tradition, was becoming noisy, distracted, uncertain. The teachings of the Buddha still echoed in temples. Yes, but that echo was growing faint, like a whisper in a crowded room. Children were learning chants, but not meaning. Adults were bowing, but not understanding. The words Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha still floated in the air, but few could say what they truly meant in their bones. The light of the Gautama Buddha, so bright, so clear, so liberating, was growing dim behind clouds of ritual, politics, and misunderstanding. And yet, deep in the heart of one man, that ancient flame still burned. Venerable Kiribathgoda, Gnanananda, Thero, a monk of profound wisdom and even deeper humility, looked upon this world with a heart full of both sorrow and hope. He saw the noise, the confusion, the craving. He saw generations growing up without ever hearing the pure Dhamma, and in that sorrow, a question began to rise. What if the Dhamma could be restored? What if people could learn again not just the surface, but the truth? This wasn't ambition, it wasn't pride, it was a vow rooted in compassion so vast, it reached beyond this lifetime. And from that vow came the seed of Mahamevnawa, not just a monastery, not just a place, but a sanctuary for the truth. The name, Mahamevnawa, is no accident. It traces its lineage back to the hallowed grounds where Arahants once walked, the ancient Mahamevnawa Grove of Anura, where Arahants first planted the Dhamma in Sri Lanka. To choose that name is to carry a responsibility, a sacred promise to protect the purity of the Buddha's teachings, not watered down, not modernized, but delivered as they were, clear, compassionate, and liberating. And that's exactly what began to happen. From humble beginnings, the monastery was founded in Gautama, on land untouched by city noise or worldly distractions. It wasn't lavish, it wasn't large, but the air was different, quiet, still, charged with something ancient. Young men came, some just boys, others already weary of the world. And there, under the guidance of the Venerable Thero, they learned not just how to shave their heads and wear robes, but how to still their minds, how to breathe in virtue, how to breathe out craving, how to touch Nibna with their hearts. Word spread, not through marketing, not through spectacle, but through something far more powerful, peace. Those who visited left lighter. Those who listened began to cry, not out of sadness, but out of remembering something they had long forgotten. They heard, many for the first time, that birth is suffering, that clinging creates the fire of becoming, that there is, in fact, a path that leads out. They heard the Four Noble Truths, not as philosophy but as the medicine they had unknowingly needed for their entire lives. And slowly, something extraordinary happened. Mahamevnawa became more than a monastery. It became a movement. Monasteries began to spring up across the island. Young monks trained in silence, in mindfulness, in love. They memorized suttas, not for pride, but to drink from them daily, to let their wisdom soak into the very marrow of their being. Nuns, to anagarikas, merged, dedicating their lives to the same noble goal. Laypeople visited in droves. They didn't come for blessings or ceremonies. They came to hear the Dhamma, to learn how to live without hatred, to raise children without delusion, to die without fear. And then, the vision widened. The ocean was no barrier. Branches of Mahamevnawa were established in Canada, the United States, Australia, Dubai, Germany, and India. Wherever there were ears ready to listen, wherever there were hearts aching for something more, the teachings flowed like a river, clear, cool, and ancient. No longer confined by geography or language, because truth, after all, knows no borders. But even this great flowering of monasteries was not the end. The world had changed. televisions buzzed, screens glowed, children spent more time with cartoons than with Dharma. And once again, the Venerable Thero asked, if the world will not come to the Dharma, can the Dharma go to the world? The answer, Shraddha TV, broadcast 24/7 across multiple channels and countries. Shraddha TV was not launched to entertain, it was launched to awaken. Its purpose, to cool the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion, not through force, but through remembrance. It reached the young, the old, the tired, the angry, the lost. It entered homes, but more importantly, it entered hearts. Children stopped to listen. Grandmothers cried with joy. Teenagers paused their scrolling, just long enough to feel something shift. Inside them and all over the world, whispers rose. This is what I've been searching for. Because even though the era of the Buddha is long past, even though the days of sitting beneath the Bodhi tree are gone, the Dharma still breathes. In every monastery built with pure intent, in every monk who memorizes a sutta not to recite, but to live. In every tear shed by a mother, hearing the truth for the first time, in every child who grows up, not just knowing the name Buddha, but knowing why he matters. And that, dear listener, is how a single thought, born from compassion, can change the world. That is how Mahamevnawa became not just a place, but a light still shining. In a world so often dark, a flame that does not burn, but heals. There's something unspeakably beautiful about early mornings in a Buddhist monastery, before the sun rises, before the birds begin their songs, before the world remembers its burdens. There is stillness, a sacred, golden stillness. And in the heart of Mahamevnawa Monastery, that stillness is filled with breath, bowed heads, saffron robes, and the echo of the Dharma. Here, we begin not with theory, but with life. And this is a story of those lives, the children of the light, those who came with nothing but longing and found everything. The first boy who came to Mahamevnawa didn't come with a suitcase. He didn't come with shoes. He didn't even come with a plan. He came with a wound. He was just 13. His mother had passed away. His father drank and shouted. The world had never once been kind. But one evening, he wandered near a village preaching hall where a monk from Mahamevnawa was speaking, and for the first time in his life, he heard these words, "There is suffering, but there is also an end to suffering." That night, he didn't sleep. He walked, he cried, he dreamed of silence, and the next morning, he arrived barefoot at the monastery gates. He said, simply, "Please, let me stay," and they did. He learned to wake up before the stars. He learned to sweep slowly, mindfully, not just the dust from the floor, but the dust from his heart. He learned to bow not in fear, but in gratitude. And little by little, he learned to be still, to sit, to breathe, to let go. A year later, he was the one giving Dharma sermons to children twice his age. He didn't speak with eloquence, he spoke with truth. He told them, "I used to cry myself to sleep, but now I just close my eyes and listen to the silence. And I know that is enough." He was one of thousands. Each child who came had their own reasons. A mother who wanted her son to find peace before the world stole it. A father who lost his own way and hoped his child might find it instead. A boy who ran from pain and found the Buddha waiting in his path. They didn't all stay forever. Some stayed for years, some stayed for lifetimes, but every single one of them was transformed. Inside Mahamevnawa there are no golden thrones, no giant statues dripping in jewels, no politics, no competition, only a question that lingers in the air like incense. How can I understand this life as it really is? And so, the children learned, not just to chant, but to understand the meaning. Not just to sit cross-legged, but to be present. They learned to see suffering not as punishment, but as a teacher. They learned to see impermanence not as tragedy, but as truth. And in their young eyes, you could see something rare called contentment. One small boy, no older than 10, once sat under a mango tree after a meditation session. An elder monk passed by and asked him, "What are you thinking?" And the boy replied, "Nothing, Bhante. I am not even thinking. I am just watching the world be born and die with every breath." That boy would later go on to ordain fully. Years later, in a foreign land, he would teach that same lesson to an old woman dying of cancer. She would smile, shed a single tear, and whisper, "I'm not afraid anymore. I see the breath now. I see it all." This is the power of early seeds. Mahamevnawa didn't just create monks, it awakened children. It gave them a language for their questions, a place for their sorrows, a path for their wonder. Some of those children now lead monasteries of their own. Some translate ancient texts for the world. Some have gone deep into the forest, searching not for solitude but for freedom. But all of them carry the same thing, the light they were given, the Dhamma that entered their hearts when they were still, soft enough to be shaped. And it's not just the boys. Let us not forget the Anagrikas, the female disciples, who walked the same path with equal strength and serenity. They renounced not just the world, but the expectations the world placed on them. They wore white robes, they shaved their heads, and they smiled, a deep, radiant smile, the kind that only comes from a heart no longer hungry. One of them once said, "People call us brave, but we didn't come here to be brave, we came here to be free," and that, they are. You see, in the West, we often measure success by what we gain, but in Mahamevnawa, success is measured by what you let go of. The fewer your attachments, the quieter your mind, the freer your soul, the closer you are to the Buddha. And the children of the light, they learn this not from books, but from living it, from sitting beside the river in silence, from offering flowers with trembling hands, from hearing the Dhamma and feeling it resonate in their bones. So the next time you wonder whether there is hope for this world, the next time you feel overwhelmed by the noise, the greed, the confusion, remember this. There are children right now sitting in silence at Mahamevnawa. There are young monks rising before dawn to practice loving kindness for the whole world. There are girls in white robes, closing their eyes and entering deep stillness so they can shine that stillness outward. There is a light still burning, not on a screen, not in a temple made of gold, but in a monastery made of simplicity, sincerity, and ancient truth. And in the hearts of those children, the Buddha still lives. What begins as a single flame, if tended with care, can illuminate the darkest valley. But what happens when that flame crosses oceans? What happens when truth, once buried under centuries of ritual and misunderstanding, finds its way into lands where the Buddha's name is barely known, let alone understood? This is the story of how Mahamevnawa's light became a global dawn, not through conquest, not through money, but through purity, through a vision so humble it could kneel them, so powerful it could shake entire hearts awake. It began with a whisper, an email, a phone call, a single family in Toronto, desperate to hear the Dhamma in its pure form. They had grown up hearing sermons in dusty corners of temples, words softened to avoid offending donors, lessons blurred by politics. But when they stumbled upon a sermon from Mahamevnawa broadcast through Shraddha TV, they felt something different. The monk spoke slowly, clearly, with love, but also with truth. No flattery, no superstition, just Dhamma. And in that moment, the mother of that family put her palms together, tears falling silently onto her sorry, and whispered, This is what I've waited my whole life for." The request was simple. Can we host a Dhamma discussion in our home? The answer was even simpler. Yes. From that tiny seed, Mahamevnawa Canada was born, not in a grand temple, but in a suburban living room, with folded chairs and a single Buddha statue. Soon, others came, immigrants, seekers, skeptics, sufferers, and all of them found the same thing, a language that spoke to their suffering, a teaching that didn't demand belief, but invited exploration. They didn't have to chant ancient Pali without knowing its meaning. They could learn, understand, live it. And so, the movement grew. Next came Los Angeles, then New Jersey, Australia, Germany, India, Dubai. Everywhere the Dhamma went, it found a home, because the Dhamma, when taught in its purest form, is not foreign, it is not Buddhist, it is human. It speaks the universal language of suffering and the universal longing to be free of it. And wherever there were hearts tired of pain, hearts tired of running in circles, Mahamevnawa found them. One day, a man walked into a Dhamma talk in New York City, was a Wall Street analyst. Sharp suit, sharper mind, empty heart. He sat in the back, arms crossed. But the monk spoke not of gods or miracles. He spoke of craving, of the endless chase, of how even when we win, we suffer because winning never ends the wanting. And something broke. In that man, tears welled up not from sadness, but from recognition. After the talk, he waited until everyone else had left, and he asked, "Can someone like me ever find peace?" The monk smiled. Someone like you. Brother, it's someone like you who most needs to. Stories like this became common. A young girl in Melbourne, recovering from an eating disorder, hears a Dharma talk on loving-kindness. A father in Dubai, drowning in stress, learns to sit in silence for the first time in decades. A teenager in Germany, on the brink of ending it all, finds hope in a simple sutta. This is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. This is the path, not poetry, not theology, instructions. And for the first time, they understood that peace wasn't a prize, it was a practice. Monasteries began to rise, ornate, not massive, but sincere. Little islands of stillness in the midst of noisy cities, places where children could learn what their parents never did, where grandparents could let go of lifetimes of fear, where monks could teach not to convert, but to liberate. And through it all, one principle guided every action: teach only what the Buddha taught, add nothing, remove nothing. Let truth do what truth does. And it did. It spread. In a world obsessed with innovation, Mahamevnawa succeeded. By doing something radical, it stayed ancient. No modernized Buddhism, no compromises for popularity, no fusion with pop psychology. Instead, it offered the real thing and trusted that the real thing was enough. And it was, because deep down, every heart, no matter how modern, longs for something unchanging, for something eternal. And the Dharma, as preserved by Mahamevnawa, gave that to them. There were challenges, of course, language barriers, cultural misunderstandings, resistance from other Buddhist groups who didn't like the emphasis on purity, but none of that stopped the movement, because it wasn't powered by politics. It was powered by faith, by merit, by monks who had given up everything not for fame, but for freedom. And by lay people who saw in those monks not just robes, but reflections of the Buddha himself. Today, when you walk into a Mahamevnawa branch in Canada or Australia or Germany, you might hear birdsong, you might hear children chanting, you might hear silence deeper than anything you've ever known. But what you'll always feel is this call and truth, not dressed up, not dumbed down, just offered like a lotus on a still lake. And if you're ready, that truth will enter you like sunlight through an open window, and it will say, you don't have to suffer anymore. You've been wandering long enough. Come home. In every era, the truth must find new ways to be heard. Once, it was spoken under Bodhi trees. Once, it was etched onto palm leaves, passed quietly from one monk to another. Then came books, then sermons in temples, and now, in a world of flashing screens and endless scrolling, the truth still finds a way. It shines through pixels, it hums through wires, it speaks through Shraddha TV. But Shraddha TV wasn't created just to inform, it was born out of urgency, because somewhere along the road, even in devout Buddhist homes, the Dhamma was being drowned out. Children could quote cartoon characters, teenagers knew every pop song lyric, grandparents sat in silence as the world raced ahead. The Buddha's voice, once the central song of the village, was now fading beneath the noise. And once again, Venerable Kiribathgoda Gnanananda, Thero, saw this clearly. He saw mothers who wanted to teach their children the Dhamma but didn't know how. He saw fathers too exhausted to attend temples, yet starving for meaning. He saw young people with empty hearts and glowing phones. And he asked, what if the Dhamma could speak through the screen? Thus, Shraddha TV was born. Not flashy, not commercial, but pure. A 24/7 channel dedicated solely to the teachings of the Gautama Buddha. No drama, no advertisements, just truth. Softly spoken, deeply rooted, eternally relevant. In its first year, the channel reached only a few thousand homes, but something unexpected happened. People didn't just watch, they changed. A mother in Gaul wrote, every night before my children sleep, we watch Shraddha together. Now my son knows the Four Noble Truths by heart. A man in Kiribathgoda called in tears, for 20 years, I had no reason to live. Then one night, I turned on the TV and heard a monk say, you are not your pain, you are the one who sees it. And I cried like a child. I knew I had found something real. Letters poured in, phone calls, donations made quietly, hearts opened silently, and the channel grew. Soon, Shraddha was streaming not just across Sri Lanka, but around the world, on satellite, on cable, online. No matter where you were, New York or Kandy, Melbourne or Motorif, you had a screen. You could find the Dhamma, not a diluted version, not a performance, but the real thing. You could hear a sermon on mindfulness. At 2 a.m. you could chant the Satipatthana Sutta with monks at dawn. You could cry as an Grick spoke gently about letting go of hatred. You could sit in your dark little apartment with the fan buzzing and the world outside howling and feel something stir inside. Hope, stillness, peace. What made Shraddha different wasn't just content, it was intention. Every word was chosen with care. Every image was meant to soothe. Even the background music was selected to ease the restless mind. This wasn't television to entertain, it was television to awaken. A viewer once said, "I used to leave the TV on to fall asleep. Now I stay up to listen, because these words, they feel like they were meant for me." And they were, because the Dharma always knows when you're ready to hear it. It wasn't long before Shraddha was being broadcast through the largest networks: Sri Lanka Telecom Channel 99 Dialogue TV, Channel 19 TNL terrestrial television, and an international web stream that never sleeps. The Buddha's voice, once limited to temples and sermons, was now echoing through living rooms, kitchens, and hospital rooms, even prison cells. One letter came from an inmate: "I made terrible choices. I thought I was beyond saving. But one day, I heard a monk on Shraddha say, 'No being is too far gone for the Dharma.' That night, I sat for meditation. The first time in my life I felt quiet, just quiet. And I knew the Buddha had not abandoned me." Shraddha didn't stop there. It became interactive. Children's programs, gentle stories that planted seeds of wisdom, animated parables, tales of kings, beggars, monks, and animals, all pointing to the same truth. Guided meditations, soft voices leading listeners inward, past the noise, past the fear, to the still space within. And for those in doubt, Q&A sessions, open, honest, without pretense. No question too small, no seeker turned away. But perhaps Shraddha's greatest achievement is this: it makes the unseen visible. In a world obsessed with appearances, Shraddha shows what can't be filmed: the softening of a hardened heart, the moment someone sees impermanence for the first time, the quiet resolve of a teenager deciding not to harm themselves, the gratitude in an old man's eyes as he bows, alone in his home, to a Buddha image on screen. Because this is what the Dharma does: it doesn't dazzle, it heals today. Shraddha TV continues to shine, unafraid. UNCOMPROM doesn't chase trends, it sets the direction back toward truth, back toward stillness, back toward freedom. It is the noble friend for those who feel alone. It is the voice in the storm. It is the sunrise in a sleepless night. It is the Buddha speaking softly through a screen, saying, "Come home. The path is still here. You've not been forgotten." How do you protect something that cannot be touched? How do you guard a truth that has no walls, no flags, no armies? You live it. That is the final lesson of this journey, the quiet, burning truth at the heart of Mahamevnawa's mission: to protect. The Dharma is not to build bigger temples, it is to build better hearts. And in this final part, we return not to the grand, but to the eternal. Not to what is seen, but what is felt, carried, practiced, and passed on. There is a story the monks at Mahamevnawa sometimes share, especially with young novices. It's not from the suttas, but from life. A layman once came to Venerable Kiribathgoda Gnanananda, the Thero. He was trembling not from fear, but from despair. He said, "Bhante, I have done wrong for most of my life. I've cheated, lied, I've never followed precepts. I don't even know where to begin." The monk didn't scold him, he didn't even look surprised. He simply asked, "Can you keep one precept, just for today?" The man nodded, and he did. The next day, the monk asked, "Can you keep two?" And so it began, a slow return, a fragile but real homecoming. One step, one breath, one moment of truth at a time. That man eventually ordained. He never became famous, never gave public sermons, but his presence alone became a sermon, because those who saw him knew redemption is possible. This is how the Dharma is protected, not by chaining it, but by becoming it. Today, thousands of disciples around the world walk silently with that same vow, to be a living refuge, to hold the Dharma not as a badge, but as a lamp. Some are monks, shaved and robed. Some are mothers, folding clothes while softly chanting the Metta Sutta under their breath. Some are teenagers, in crowded cities, turning off their phones at 10 p.m. to sit in stillness. Some are elderly men who have begun again learning to forgive, to bow, to smile, and all of them, in their own way, are guardians of the flame. Mahamevnawa does not define success by followers or fame. Its success is seen in other ways. In the boy who decides not to steal because he remembers a sutta he heard on Shraddha TV. In the girl who chooses compassion over cruelty because she learned what hatred truly does. In the old man who, on his deathbed, smiles not out of comfort, but because he knows, I have tried, I have changed, I am not afraid. That's what protecting the Dharma looks like. Not shouting louder, not debating smarter, but living quieter still. Mahamevnawa knows the danger is real. In every generation, the Dharma faces threats not from outside, but from within. The temptation to dilute truth to gain popularity, the pressure to modernize ancient wisdom to fit fleeting trends, the quiet erosion of discipline when rules become inconvenient. That's why Mahamevnawa trains its monks to stand firm, not with rigidity, but with reverence. They memorize not only suttas, but the meaning behind them. They don't teach until they've lived it. They don't preach until they've practiced. They don't bend truth to please. They speak it because it pleases the Buddha, and that is enough. In a world addicted to performance, Mahamevnawa offers presence. In a world drowning in information, it offers understanding. That in a world that asks, what do you believe? It asks instead, what do you experience when you are still? And in that silence, the Buddha still walks among us, not in body, but in principle, not in image, but in intention, not in history, but in this very breath. There's an old saying among the monks, the Dharma will survive, not because it is strong, but because someone still loves it enough to protect it with their life. And protect it they do, by waking before dawn, by walking barefoot, by speaking gently, by not grasping what is not theirs, by renouncing the world not because it is evil, but because it is evil, but because it is empty, and in that emptiness, they find everything. But the greatest legacy of Mahamevnawa isn't the buildings, it isn't even the teachings, it's the transformed lives. The monk who weeps when he recites the Satipatthana Sutta, not from sadness, but from awe. The laywoman who gives up gossip because she finally sees the suffering it causes. The teenage boy who chooses loving kindness instead of revenge and feels a lightness he cannot explain. These are the miracles. These are the monuments. This is how the Dharma continues, not with thunder, but with tears, silence, and truth. So now, dear listener, if you've come with pain, if you've wandered long, if you've felt the ache of not knowing what this life is for, know this, you are not alone. There are paths beneath your feet, carved by countless others. There is a flame in you that remembers, and there is a monastery not far, not foreign that whispers, come, sit, learn, be free. The light still shines. It always has. May it shine in you. May you protect it, not by fighting, but by awakening.